Hello everyone, welcome to another Disney vs. Original Work video, and today we are heading towards the Disney Renaissance with The Little Mermaid. Yes, I think The Little Mermaid film is probably considered to be one of Disney's most highly valued works, especially since it launched the Renaissance, the Disney Renaissance, as some people might call it. And it really allowed Disney to get kind of back up on its feet from where it was originally, because it was in a rut for a while, and then now that we have this fairy tale bring that sort of light and shine it down on Disney, it's given them a lot more of it has given them a lot more of a positive presence throughout the 90s era. And this film was really the one to launch it. Now, the Disney film is based upon The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen, which is also one of his most famous works. So this is a fairly known fairy tale, sort of similar to the Brothers Grimm and how it was really well known for its time, like Snow White and such. So I think you'll see sort of that impact sort of reflective on people wanting to go see The Little Mermaid, especially since The Little Mermaid is based on such a sort of famous work. The interesting thing is I don't think a lot of people know really about the original work, and they just know the name. And actually the original work is fairly different from the Disney version. There are a lot of differences within here. I'm going to talk mainly about the major differences that I think are very significant as far as character and plot-wise are concerned. But for the most part, the original work follows the Disney version at some points fairly closely when it comes to maybe plot, or when it comes to maybe aspects of the Little Mermaid character. But for the most part, it does venture off into its own separate work, as opposed to the Disney version where there's a lot of things added in and taken out. So without further ado, let me start by discussing the original work. Now, the original work starts off a bit differently than the Disney work. The Disney work offers this fairly kind of enhancing and fairly sort of epic exposition into the world of the ocean and into mermaids and such, especially when you hear Eric, who's the prince in the Disney version, he overhears some sailor talking about how there's mer people and all that stuff. So it kind of really opens itself up into this sort of mystery and the awe of the ocean. And Hans Christian Andersen's writing seems to open up in that similar way by describing sort of the details of the ocean and how basically the mermaids sort of live in this kind of a world. And it starts off with sort of explaining the characters. Now, what you need to understand is that they did make this kind of, in the Disney work, they did kind of make this like the original, where King Triton, but in the original work he's called the Sea King. They made him basically a widower, but in the original work they have this grandmother character who's not present at all in the Disney work at all. There's no grandma of the princesses, the sea princesses, or the mermaids. So you do have a King Triton character, you do have the Sea King, but you don't have a grandma in the Disney work. But in the original there is a grandma, and basically she plays a huge role and influence sort of throughout the story, and once I start explaining more in depthly about this, you'll kind of see why. But for the most part, she has a total of, I believe it's 6, yes, there are 6 mermaids total. So Ariel has sisters like she does in the Disney work. I can't exactly remember how many were in the Disney work, but in the original work there's 6 total, including Ariel. Except in the original work she's not called Ariel, she's just called Little Mermaid, so that's another important thing to note here. And for the most part, it kind of, in the beginning, it's kind of describing the different sisters and sort of how they about sort of their stuff. It's kind of interesting how they arrange certain things within the ocean and what they take from the ocean. And we kind of start getting a sense too of the Little Mermaid, in this case being Ariel's character. In this case though, she's called the Little Mermaid. And this character is fairly different from Ariel. Ariel is a rather stubborn, more self-centered character, I believe, than the Little Mermaid is in the original. I would describe her in the original work as a lot like someone like Snow White. She's very like thoughtful and quiet, or well, thoughtful and quiet to the extent of being rather sort of on the more innocent side. She's not really wild like Ariel is in the Disney work. So I think that's a fairly important distinction to note, because it literally starts off sort of with this exposition of explaining the sisters and explaining Ariel's character. And the interesting thing too, though, is that the Disney work hams up this idea in the way beginning too, that King Triton does not want his daughters or anybody really going up to the land, because land people obviously, and you'll see this too in a scene where Sebastian is being confronted by the chef, you'll kind of see where they probably get this mentality of humans being somehow evil. And he does not want them going up on the surface because it's dangerous, because there'll be humans up there, so he wants to keep everybody safe. And you kind of see how that's a really important drive for his character, especially when he has daughters and he wants to protect them. But in the original work, it's really more of the grandma who plays a role here, and it kind of acts as like the mentor figure, unlike Triton in the Disney work. And the Triton character in the original work, who's the Sea King, he's kind of left off to the side, and he's just kind of a background character. He's not really given anything much to do, but basically she's kind of just states openly, yeah, when you are all 15, all you mermaids, when all my little grandchildren, you can all go up to the surface. On your 15th birthday, you can all go up on the surface for the first time. And it's sort of treated as like a form of adulthood, like you're growing up. Which is kind of interesting, because she states later on that mermaids live to be like 300 years old, and then for some reason 15 is like you reaching adulthood, which kind of doesn't really make sense to me. But I guess if it's a fairy tale, you know, Andersen can do whatever he wants here. But basically she states that when you're 15, you can go up. So basically, since this is the Little Mermaid here, being in this original work, as she's called, she can't go up until last, because all her other sisters are older than her, and basically she just watches them as they go up to the surface, and then they come back and basically talk about what they saw and what they thought was just so cool or whatever. That's basically how the beginning sort of starts off, is that she observes how the other sisters are going up, and then she's just left with this anticipation, like, ooh, I wonder what I'll see, and oh, I can't wait till I'm that age, and yada yada. so basically that's really how the original work starts off, really. This is with that kind of anticipation to finally be up on land. In the Disney work, this is completely different because Ariel is a very disobeying daughter in this movie. So she goes up to the surface even though she's not supposed to. Whereas this Ariel is fairly obedient to authority, the Ariel in the Disney work, totally not obedient to authority here. She goes up when she wants to go up. And she kind of already has this fascination with humans. I don't think it's until later that the Little Mermaid in the original work starts to really be fascinated with humans, because she hasn't seen any humans. So these are two completely different girls. And the interesting thing is that since Ariel is disobedient and kind of does what she wants, she doesn't put anybody else in front, or offers other, or takes other things that are important to other people into consideration. And this, I think, is fairly shown off way in the beginning, when she totally forgets that she's supposed to be performing at a concert. And it is emphasized as well as in the original work that the Little Mermaid has a really pretty voice, and it's the same thing with Ariel in the Disney work. You know, they have the pretty voice, ha ha ha, and they're very pretty, and yada yada yada. And that's really a big part of how Hans Christian Andersen describes the Little Mermaid, as well as the Disney work. If you've probably seen Ariel and her blue eyes and then just the red hair, you know, a lot of people find that, I think, fairly appealing to look at because she is really pretty. So that's both clearly there. It's just that there's just the character and the personality are just completely off kilter here, because we've got one kind of extreme and then another kind of extreme. It almost seems like that because this Ariel is this Little Mermaid in the original work is just fairly, like, for the most part, fairly quiet and reserved, and at the same time, though, fairly innocent and charming. I think Ariel, although she has charm to her, I don't think she's one of those characters that's meant to be charming in personality so much as her looks, because she is a little because of her behavior, and how she's a little bit more of a wild child. So you'll kind of see in the beginning how Ariel is completely disobedient to authority and forgets about the concert. There's no concert in the original work, by the way, but it literally starts off with sort of on the wrong footing for her, especially considering the fact that Triton sort of lost his grip on her, and it's really not going well. And so we kind of see that sort of in the beginning of the Disney version, but unlike here, it just completely follows a completely different format. And the interesting thing, though, too, is that it's not until the storm when she gets the statue in the Disney work, and the statues, you know, of Eric and the prince, and she keeps it like in this big room, you know, where she has all of her stuff, and that's not in the original work at all. There's no stuff, you know. She's not really obsessed with stuff in the original work. So there is no scene where she's like, you know, ooh, I'm arranging stuff, or ooh, look at this stuff. No. Isn't this neat? No, there's none of that in the original work at all. It's just her finally getting to the point of where she can go to the surface, and them sort of describing how the sisters' experiences going up on the surface. And I like how sort of the way, you know, you sort of have to read Hans Christian Andersen's language to understand sort of the beauty of how he describes things, because he describes things fairly fairly just delicately and explains things, uses like very beautiful language, and I just like how he writes and describes these particular scenes, because sometimes they're hard to imagine, but at the same time they just sound so delicate and pretty. I think he likes to use these pretty forms of language, but for the most part, that's really how the beginning starts off with the original work, unlike the Disney work, who in the original work, it seems like things are starting off on the right foot, and, you know, they're getting to have experiences and things of that nature, and in the Disney work, it seems to be getting off on the wrong foot, especially with Ariel missing that concert. So there's that. And basically, the first time that, and this is interesting too, because in the original work, the first time the Little Mermaid goes up, that's when the storm comes, and that is when you have the scene of when she sees the prince and the ship and such. With the Disney version, it's only, I think, really when Ariel gets, I think, sort of to the point where she's sort of just mad at, you know, the authority that she's under, and she just is like, I'm going up to the surface. It's like, ooh, there's a ship. I'm gonna go up on the surface and climb on it, and then, ooh, I see a prince, and yada yada. That's really how the Disney work plays out. It's sort of, she goes counter against authority after, you know, storming off sort of in this kind of frustration at Triton, and having that, you know, that whole scene where she's, you know, wishing that she was, you know, at that world, in that world up at the surface. And that's really when the Disney work sort of, it goes from bad and discouraging to sort of worse because of the conditions that end up happening. But for the most part, the storm scene pretty much plays out in the same way. You know, Ariel sees a prince, and then she's like, ah, and then there's a storm, and then the prince falls under. There's no dog, by the way, in the original work. No Max, and there's no butler guy. I really forget this guy's name, but you'll see him sometimes with Eric, and he's actually the one that takes him away after he's passed out on the shore, which I'll get to later. But none of that in the original work at all. No comic relief, no cutesiness. There's not a lot of cutesiness, I think, in the original work. No, it's not really kiddie at all for the most part, and you'll definitely see why as I keep unfolding this plot here. But basically, what you have to understand is that in the original Little Mermaid, the mermaid goes up for the first time, and then that's where she sees the prince, and that's where she sees the ship and all that stuff. That's really when, and that's when the storm happens, and that's when she saves him. And the saving is the same thing in the Disney work as well, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. Ariel realizes, oh no, there's a storm, and oh no, the ship's going under. Oh no, Eric is in trouble. What do I do? Okay, bring him to shore. Alright, save him. Have little Gaga like, I'm taking pieces off your hair to be on the side so I can see your pretty face. Yep, that's all in there. Same with the original work. She kind of does the same exact thing. She doesn't kiss him though, unlike the Disney work, where that's totally left out. But she kind of is. The Little Mermaid in the original is really like head over heels. I mean, in the Disney work, yes, Ariel is just crazy for Eric after meeting him, but I think the original work kind of takes it to that more to the extreme where you know, she's kissing him before he even wakes up, and yeah, it's not bad really. I don't think it's intended to be fairly creepy, but it seems like that she is very, very passionate. It does give off the sense of that she's really, really passionate. And even though in the Disney work it's played off to the idea that Ariel is passionate about Eric, she's also passionate about the world as a whole. And I guess she just sees him as being part of that world. And so I think that kind of makes it less creepy, and I think that's what Disney was really going for. Like, yeah, she loves this world, you know, and she has all this stuff, and you know, that's why she wants to go up and be with the humans and all that jazz. But unlike the original work, it's not until, you know, later on until she can finally go to the surface. So we don't really have this kind of build up to going on land. So that's really, I think, another important distinction to know. So really that's how you sort of see how we're getting to sort of the middle of these two works, but for the most part, the original work plays with the idea that, you know, since finally that she's 15, she can go up whenever she wants, unlike the Disney work. She can just go and observe and be happy, and as more as she's observing, the more she just, you know, just totally engrossed in the world, and totally engrossed more with the prince, and, you know, it just becomes something it feels a little bit more developed, whereas the Disney version, it does feel like there's a rush to get on land. Whereas the original work, it sort of takes its time to sort of build up into the Little Mermaid becoming human. The interesting thing though too is that when Eric is, and in the original work there's no name for him either, but in the Disney work he wakes up and he thinks he sees a girl, and then once he's fully conscious, he doesn't know that Ariel is the one who saved him. In the original work, it sort of plays out in that same way. He doesn't know that it's her that really saved him, and that's what makes her a little bit depressed afterwards. Unlike Ariel, who's full of like determination in the Disney work to totally like, I'm gonna go on land and I'm gonna prove that I was the one who saved him, and you know that I'm the one. In the original work, she sort of acts more sad because when he wakes up, it says at one point that she doesn't smile at him. He doesn't smile at her, and doesn't realize that it's her that saved him. But again, I think she is hiding at one point, or hiding too, especially when the other humans come, and she just hides herself. So I guess this kind of reaction doesn't really make any much sense to me. Like, oh, you hide, and then you expect him to think that it that it was you? You know, that part doesn't really make sense to me, but I can kind of understand her shyness and her sadness of the fact that, oh, he'll never know that it was me. You know, that can really rub off, especially when she feels like she is sort of hopeless in those circumstances. But I think these circumstances made Ariel in the Disney work more determined to go on land, and I think in the original work it made her more discouraged. And it's interesting because in the original work there's, I think, multiple people that actually come. Yeah, it's actually young girls and they basically come, and then they see the prince on the beach, and and then he ends up mistaking one of the girls, on the that comes to be the one that saved him. So yes, so we have this kind of misinterpretation here going on. There's a misinterpretation in the Disney work as well, which we'll get to, but the misinterpretation here in the original work is that he sees this one girl that was actually there and thinks, oh, she's the one that saved me, even though in reality it was Ariel or the Little Mermaid that saved him. So it's kind of that illusion, that illusion going on. But you'll see how this illusion is kind of different in the Disney work. That's really where we get to the point where in the original work she becomes again fairly passionate about the world and such, whereas in the beginning of the Disney work that's already really clearly established. And so you can kind of see the difference here. Disney work opens up with, I want to be in that world. Original work, not until sort of the middle-ish section of, no, now I want to really be in this world. But there's also something also important to note. The Disney work kind of makes it seem like Ariel wants to be part of with humans and humankind, and she wants to be with Eric. That's really all Ariel wants in the entire movie of the Disney work. In the original work, she wants to be human, she wants to be with the prince, but she also wants something else, and this is something that the grandma sort of describes to her. And she basically tells her how human beings have souls. And she says basically that sea creatures, in particular mermaids, don't have souls. So after 300 years they'll basically turn to sea foam and die, and there won't be any existence afterwards. But she states that humans have souls, and she basically says human beings, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever, lives after the body has been turned to dust. It rises up through the clear, pure air beyond the glittering stars. As we rise out of the water and behold all land of the earth, so do they rise to unknown and glorious regions which we shall never see. So basically she's just stating that openly that, you know, when humans die, they'll basically go up to heaven and they have a soul, so even if their bodies die, they'll be something. But mermaids basically don't have that, I guess. And there's really not an explanation as to why. And basically the grandma just kind of shakes it off because the mermaid asks, and the Little Mermaid asks, and she kind of is like, we'll be better off, you know, 300 years and then we're gone, you know, that's better. And she just kind of just doesn't want to really answer that question, and sort of comes up with not with an answer to the question, but sort of a statement saying, yep, you know, even if we go, it's better that way. And I guess the Little Mermaid, for some reason, is fairly curious about this soul, and she decides now that she wants a soul. Which is kind of sudden. It does feel a little sudden, especially since there's no kind of build-up towards it, and there's kind of really no explanation as to why she wants it. I guess just if she were to say, maybe I'm like afraid of dying, I mean, I think that could be a reasonable explanation, but it doesn't really explain why in the novel or the story why she wants an immortal soul. But in order to obtain an immortal soul, this is basically what you have to do. And it is explained like this by the grandma. She basically says, unless a man were to love you so much that you were more to him than his father or mother, and if all his thoughts and all his love were fixed upon you, and the priest placed his right hand in yours, and he promised to be true to you here and hereafter, then his soul would glide into your body, and will obtain a share in the future happiness of mankind. He would give his soul to you and retain his own as well. But this can never happen. Your fishtail, which amongst us is considered so beautiful, is thought on earth to be quite ugly, so they do not know any better, and they will think it necessary to have two stout props, which they call legs, in order to be handsome. So basically she's saying, yeah, this is what you have to do, but it's pretty much a lost cause. Because ultimately humans like humans, and humans don't like mermaids, so it kind of makes sense. But she basically kind of just tells her, you know, this is what you would have to do to order to obtain this immortal soul. Now, there's no wanting of an immortal soul in the Disney version, and I think a lot of people already know this. Ariel just wants the man, and she wants the world. That's it. That's it. She wants to be human, wants to be with the people, and she wants to be with Eric. That's basically the entire point of her wanting to get what she wants. But there's no conflict between the Sea King and the Little Mermaid in the original work. There's no like father-daughter feuding. But the Disney work clearly, as I've mentioned earlier, sort of emphasizes this, especially in the beginning, with his whole gripe with humans. And once he discovers that she has this whole fortress basically dedicated to human stuff, he's not the happiest camper in the world. And it's also when we get the scene where she actually gets a human statue, which again was in the original work, but way beforehand, before she even went to the surface. And it's not really clearly explained whether or not the statue is the prince or not. But in the Disney work, it's clearly Eric, and basically Triton just gets really, really mad after seeing this all, and basically he just destroys everything. He destroys all her stuff. You know, he says, you disobeyed me again, you know, you saved a human being, this isn't fair. No, you're not gonna be human, this ain't happening, just gonna blow stuff up. 'Cause that's what I do when I'm mad, and I'm Triton, and I got a pitchfork. So basically he just destroys all of her stuff in the Disney work, and she cries, and then two eels come, and it's also pointed out too in the Disney work that Ursula is sort of observing Ariel, and you know, through her magic, and apparently she kind of knows, yes, I know her weakness. So basically she sends those two eels, Flotsam Jetsam, which are not in the original work. She sends them to sort of seduce Ariel to going to her so that she can make a deal with her. That's really how the Disney work sort of plays into this whole shenanigans, you know. And basically Flotsam and Jetsam tell Ariel, hey, if you want legs, you want to be human, come with us, we'll show you somebody. Ursula, yeah, you know her, right? Yeah, we'll, you know, just come with us, and we'll take you there. And Ariel's just so mad at this point, really, really mad, and very sad and hurt that obviously she just totally goes for it. And it's also emphasized too, and it should be emphasized, that Ariel has these two companions, Flounder and Sebastian, not in the original work at all, but they are there and present, and they have a fairly particular important influence on her. And Flounder is sort of the go-with-the-flow type side Disney character, and Sebastian is sort of trying to be the authority figure, but he can't really be the authority figure because he just is so small, and it's hard for him to display authority and take authority on Ariel, and basically he's sort of responsible for her, and Triton sort of gives him that job. So those are those characters too, and you'll kind of see how ultimately Sebastian is really a big influence on Ariel in the movie, even though she doesn't really take his advice a lot of the time. But none of that in the original work. On the original work, she is kind of on her own. But she does have her sisters and stuff that do kind of help her in certain circumstances, but in totally different circumstances, unlike the Disney work, which I will explain later on as we are kind of going through this. But there's no mention or reference in the Disney work of an immortal soul, so that stuff is completely not in there. And basically, in the original work, she kind of already knows who the Sea Witch is. It's not like in the Disney work where these eels appear and kind of tell Ariel, oh yeah, Ursula's the one who can actually give you legs. I think it's made clear in the Disney work that Ariel does know about Ursula, but she doesn't know that initially that she's the one who can provide something for her in order to make her human. But in the original work, there's nobody that tells her about this. The Little Mermaid already knows the Sea Witch, and she goes, yep, I'm just gonna go to her. I'm gonna go to her, even though I'm afraid of her, but I'm gonna go to her because she's probably the person who can help me. And basically, it sort of goes into depth into sort of describing the Sea Witch's area. And it's sort of interesting when you read into the description, but I think I'll just try to read this one little paragraph here because it is sort of interesting. She now came to this, and she meaning the Little Mermaid, now came to the space of the marshy ground in the wood, where large fat water snakes were rolling in the mirror and showing their ugly drape-colored bodies. In the midst of this spot stood a house, built with bones of shipwrecked human beings. There sat the Sea Witch, allowing a toad to eat from her mouth, just as some people sometimes fed a canary with a piece of sugar. She called the ugly water snakes her little chickens, and allowed them to crawl all over her bosom. I know what you want, said the Sea Witch. It's very stupid of you, but you shall have your way, and it will bring you sorrow, my pretty princess. So, the interesting thing here is that, in the original work, from what I read off to you, the Sea Witch literally knows and openly admits sort of the kinds of consequences and, of what initially, the Little Mermaid wants to do. In the Disney work, she goes to the Sea Witch, but the Sea Witch, meaning Ursula in this case, and again, the original work just calls her Sea Witch, she's not given a name, but in the Disney work, Ursula kind of just plays tricks with her, and kind of says, yeah, I know what you want. Let's make a contract, let's make a deal. And she kind of just goes into, and I think the song, Poor Unfortunate Souls, is really interesting because she's sort of just trying to display that the things that she's doing is out of kindness and respect, and doesn't really go in so much into the consequences of making this deal, because she wants Ariel to make the deal, and it's kind of like treated more as like a business negotiation, just a very shady business negotiation in the Disney work. But in the original work, she's totally open. She just says, yep, this is what you have to do, these are the consequences, that's it. And there's no intention of the Sea Witch sort of being a villain. The Disney work, as I will explain later, really intends Ursula to be a villain. In the original work, even though I've described this fairly interestingly awkwardish paragraph to you about how creepy the Sea Witch lives, she's not a villain at all. She's not a villain. All she wants to do is to just make a deal, and that's it. And she does like potions and stuff, so kind of makes sense that she'd be called a Sea Witch. But it is emphasized in the Disney work that Ursula is a Sea Witch too, but has a name at least. But basically, she sort of tells her that it's going to be rather painful as well. There's this whole idea of pain and suffering, I think, in the original work that Hans Christian Andersen likes to play with. But unlike the Disney work, the original work plays out to the idea that the Little Mermaid takes a drought, basically, which I guess is just like a potion, and that's how she'll turn into human. But in the Disney work, you clearly see the transformation before your eyes, and you see like that Ursula just makes magic and stuff, and then, you know, actually uses hands at one point, you know, to like get the voice out, and it's very theatrical, and you could totally tell that the animators were totally into making those parts. But it is interesting to see how Ariel transforms in the Disney work, how she's kind of absorbed into like a bubble, and then oh, you have legs, oh, now we need to take you to the surface, and Sebastian and Flounder just, ooh, we're gonna go to the surface now. Original work totally different. It just plays with the idea of her going up onto the land, and then to drink something before sunrise, and then she'll become human. And although it plays into that idea of having a potion, these consequences are fairly listed in the suffering, sort of, like I mentioned earlier, that Hans Christian Andersen likes to play with. So it basically states that the Little Mermaid will still have the same floating gracefulness of movement, and no dance will ever tread so lightly, but at every step that she takes, it will feel as if they were treading upon sharp knives, and the blood must flow. And that's basically how the Sea Witch describes it to her. She says, you're just gonna suffer every time you try to walk when you become human. You know, you'll be walking, but you'll be suffering pain and agony. And Disney work, there's none of that. Ariel doesn't suffer at all, really, becoming human so much. All she really has to deal with is just a balance. But there's no pain, there's no blood. But that's a fairly clear indication of Hans Christian Andersen sort of playing around with this idea of suffering. And also the way the spell sort of works is different too. In the original work, the Sea Witch basically tells her that for once your shape has become like a human being, you can no more be a mermaid. You will never return through the water to your sisters or your father's palace again. And if you do not win the love of the prince, so that he is willing to forget his father and mother for your sake, and to love you with his whole soul, and allow the priest to join your hands that you may be man and wife, then you will never be an immortal soul. The first morning after he marries another, your heart will break, and you will become foam on the crest of the waves. So basically, there's also these other things that are within the spell that are sort of consequential. She has to basically win his love, so that she can marry him and so that she can gain that immortal soul in the original work. But if she ends up marrying another, it's off to the sea foam and dying non-immortal soul for you. That's what all you'll be. And if the prince decides not to ultimately marry the Little Mermaid. Now, in the Disney work, this is completely different. Disney work doesn't openly state that Ariel needs to marry the prince, but it openly states that she needs to kiss him on the sunset of the third day before the sunset. That's when she has to kiss him, in order for her to remain human permanently. Okay, this is just so that she can be human permanently. But Ursula highlights in the consequences that if she doesn't kiss him, and this has to again be a kiss of true love like Disney, like in so many other the Disney works, it has to be true love, and if she doesn't, then the only consequence is that she turns back into a mermaid. But the other kind of creepy thing about it is that ultimately Ursula says, you know what, you belong to me after that. If you don't fulfill the goal that you want to achieve, I get ownership of you. I own you. I own you. Yeah, that's basically how it works. The interesting thing though is you kind of, if you've never watched the film before, and that's what I always thought originally when I was watching it as a kid, when she does like this close-up, and it kind of cracks me up when Ursula goes, you belong to me, and I go, what does that mean? Does that mean she's a prisoner, or she's a slave? What does that mean? And then later on, when I watched it towards the end, I go, oh, that's what it meant, huh? And even as a kid, I was so smart back then, figuring all this stuff out. But for the most part, that's really the curse in the Disney work. It seems like there's a lot of less consequences, and they tried to make things seem a little bit lighter since they wanted to make it for kids, and I think that is kind of understandable, especially, the fact that she'll die, if she doesn't complete her mission. That I can see why Disney would be like, no, we're not gonna make her die. We're not gonna even make that a consequence if she doesn't fulfill her goals. And we're gonna totally take immortal soul out of here because we can't seem like religiously biased or whatever, which I think is fairly understandable too, because I think Hans Christian Andersen sort of displays this religious sort of connotation to his works, especially when you look at the suffering too and the blood and bleeding. It's completely there that this is like Christian allegory and stuff. But basically, there's also another thing too that needs to be noted, and you might be wondering too. Yeah, well, what? Michelle, you forgot about this. What about the voice? No, I didn't forget about the voice. In the original work, it is rather gruesome. So just be prepared. Be prepared for your childhoods. Just hold on to your childhoods with two hands, because this is probably going to be a little hard to swallow. But in the original work, yes, there is a price in order for the sea witch to kind of make her potion complete. She needs Ariel's voice, basically. And in order to do this, she basically cuts off her tongue. Yeah. She says, yeah, if you want to fulfill this, you're gonna have to give me your tongue. And have me cut it off. That's really how the original work plays itself out. Give me your tongue, and I will give you your legs. That's kind of how it works. But totally not like in the Disney work. Disney work just plays it out as it's her voice. It's just her like vocal cords, and It's all emphasized through, you know, how Ursula's magic and how she uses the hands to, you know, just grab the voice out of her. Yeah, a lot less gruesome than just cutting off your tongue. But basically that's how the original work plays out. Cutting of the tongue. Just cutting of the tongue. Which is rather just like, I can totally understand why Disney wouldn't want to put that in there. But that's really how these two kind of spells work. Ariel is given legs. Consequence, if she doesn't fulfill the goal of kissing Eric before the third day on the sunset, she belongs to Ursula and she's Ursula's property. In the original work, if she does not complete her mission, she dies. Along the way, while being human, she's going to suffer. She has to cut off her tongue, and basically she has to get the prince to marry her and sort of declare his undying love for her. That's kind of how these two are kind of weighted out here. Which is rather interesting. And again, too, in the Disney work, yeah, there is this thing with Ariel having to give up her voice. And the interesting thing is both the Little Mermaid and both Ariel are kind of going, wait, what? Why I have to give up my voice? Well, then how will I communicate with him? And the interesting thing is that both the Sea Witch and Ursula sort of explain it in the same way. They kind of go, you know, your beautiful form, your graceful walk, and your expressive eyes, surely with these you can enhance a man's heart. Well, have you lost your courage? Put out your little tongue, and I may cut it off as my payment. Then you shall have the powerful drought. And drought's basically like poison. I don't know why they call it drought. I guess drought is another word for poison or potion or something like that to that effect. Find that rather interesting. But yeah, she's just basically saying, you'll use your body language, girl. You know, that's what you'll do, and you know, then you'll have your prince, and woohoo, it'll all be good, and you'll be human, and you'll have a mortal soul, and it'll all be good. And it's kind of the same thing in the Disney version. She says, you know, use your body language, and everything will be okay. And they both are sold on it. And they both succumb and say, yep, I'll do it. And no matter the consequences that both these characters face, they're like, yep, it's worth it. And, you know, and again, it's kind of, again, the same concept of, you know, Ariel would have to leave everybody behind, and she considers this, and then the little princess considers this as well. And it's actually interesting because Little Mermaid, excuse me, not the little princess. The Little Mermaid actually goes back to her sisters and, you know, kind of says goodbye to them. I think, though, while they're sleeping. You know, with Ariel, it's like you have to get her up on the surface. You know, you can't leave her down there. You know, she can't go back because Ursula just changes her in the water. So that does kind of make sense. You know, I mean, I'm thinking that Ariel probably would have said goodbye, but you know, when suddenly this crazy Ursula lady is Ursula Sea Witch lady is making you into human right away, then yeah, you should probably get going to the surface. And the interesting thing too is that in the original work there's no like signature. It's like she doesn't have to sign anything. She just openly says, yeah, I'll do whatever needs to be done. In the Disney work there's actually a contract where Ursula makes Ariel sign in her name. So I thought that was an interesting difference, because it is kind of treated as it's so funny how the Disney work treats it like a business negotiation. But basically she ends up on land, same thing as the original work. And then she comes across the prince, and in the Disney work they try to cover her up. Her hair is not that long to cover her entire body, but in the original work it's enough to cover her completely. So that's how she kind of presents herself to the prince, like, here I am with this very long hair, so you can't see anything. and in the Disney work it plays out with the idea of Scuttle being sort of the, again, another side character that's not in the original work, that sort of comes up into Ariel and says, yep, let's make you, let's make you look fine, and let's put on this thing. I don't really know what it is, but it looks like sails or just some white dress thing that will just make you from scratch. And basically that's what he does. And that's how Ariel gets sort of noticed. And the interesting thing too is that the dog, actually Max, who's in the Disney work and not in the original work, sort of kind of notices her first and goes, oh, there's somebody here, and that's how Eric spots her, basically, Eric being the prince in this case. And the prince in the original work just kind of goes, oh, stumbles upon her, oh, there's a princess here, or I don't know who this is. But basically he kind of just takes her under his wing, and they do the whole bit too in Disney. They pamper her, they make her look pretty, and yada yada. And he treats her with respect, and dignity, and they go out and they do stuff together like in the Disney work too, except she's suffering and in pain because every time she walks, there's blood and stuff, and I really don't know how that works. But I guess that's how it works in the original work. She's just it's like walking on knives. And basically this is, I think, happening more for a longer span, unlike the Disney work where it's like, you have to kiss him within 3 days. There's a time limit here, there's a rush. In the original work it likes to draw things out, so it offers the many different occasions that she and the prince would go off and do stuff. And basically the original work plays with the idea that the grandmother, as well as the Sea King, as well as the sisters, come and visit her, like at nighttime or something, and then they can talk and have conversations or be around her, sort of. So it does seem to offer this kind of connection still in the original work, where they can communicate. Which is kind of interesting, because I don't understand how they would actually know of what she did, since she didn't tell them really about this originally. But basically she can see from the distance the grandma and Sea King, and for the most part it seems like the sisters had the most contact with her, compared to the Sea King and the grandma in the original work. In the Disney work there's a total emphasis on separation and also being lost. I think there's Triton at one point sends out like a search party to look for her. They don't know where she is, they don't know what's happened to her, so there is this really deep concern for her, and Triton really maintains that sort of dynamic and interesting Disney dad, where he's really concerned and he wants to find her and he doesn't know what to do, and they're really freaking out, and it seems like that he's the one who's given the most character here, and not really the sisters at all. The sisters aren't really given personality so much in the Disney work. They're rarely in it for the most part. But Triton seems to be the most concerned out of the bunch, and really worried about his daughter, and especially since he doesn't really want to be on the wrong foot with her, and I think it's clearly emphasized, especially in the Disney work. But in the original work there seems to be no conflict between any of the sisters, between Ariel or any adult figure. It seems like they're just fine with her decision, and the Disney work emphasizes that they don't know anything about that decision, which to me makes a little bit more sense, unlike the original work where it doesn't really. she doesn't really openly go, hey, you know, I'm leaving now, bye-bye. You know, she just kind of does it privately and secretly without them really knowing. I think she just, you know, kind of kisses the sisters goodnight, but doesn't really go, hey, I'm gonna leave now and you know, suffer all of this for some guy and for an immortal soul. So there's that important difference to note. And so basically a time span happens throughout the original work, and it gets to the point where the mermaid is almost asking, you know, asking the prince sort of, do you love me? And this is kind of how this response sort of plays out, and it's not really what you would expect or maybe like. He basically says, yes, you are dear to me, and said the prince, for you have the best heart and you are the most devoted to me. You are like a young maiden whom I once saw, but whom I shall never meet again. I was in a ship that was wrecked, and the waves cast me ashore near a holy temple, where several young maidens performed the service. The youngest of them found me on the shore and saved my life. I saw her but twice, and she is the only one in the world whom I could love. But you are like her, and you have almost driven her image out of my mind. She belongs to the holy temple, and my good fortune has sent you to me instead of her, and we will never part. So for the most part, it does seem like he does love her to a certain extent, but at the same time it's like, yeah, I love you, but not as much as that one girl who saved me. It's kind of depressing, especially when the Little Mermaid is the one who saved you. Oh. And so that is kind of frustrating, especially to read. You just want to slap the prince across his face and go, what's your problem? You don't understand. Just because she saved you, that doesn't mean that you need to be, you dummy. In the Disney work, this kind of plays out a little differently. And I think this is where we can safely say that the prince here seems a little bit better in the Disney version, the Eric, than the prince that is not given a name in the original work. In the Disney version, he's a little bit more dynamic in the sense that, yeah, he takes Ariel in, yeah, he treats her nicely, yeah, they go out and they do stuff, and yeah, I think it is emphasized that he does like her and does appreciate her. However, there's this whole other aspect to his character where he does want that one person who saved his life. He just doesn't know who it is at all. Unlike the original work where he thinks he knows who it is. And it's kind of emphasized too that since Ariel has a pretty voice, that somehow makes it so that she's recognizable. And when you have the voice taken away, that's clearly a factor there. And I think it's clearly emphasized with the Disney work, since Ursula saw the whole debacle with her magic of Ariel singing to him. I think it made it clear that, oh, you know what I should do? I should take away her voice, and then that'll allow me to get what I want, you know. And she won't be able to, you know, win Eric's heart. And I think that's really the whole point the Disney version tries to get down. So basically what ends up happening is that Ursula disguises herself as a very pretty woman, a pretty evil woman, except with brown hair this time and long, but at the same time she looks a lot like Ariel. And basically, as Eric is just about to give up, you know, and this is why I like Eric as a prince, actually, is that he had his hopes for wanting to be with the person who saved him, but he looked at this, he thought at the same time, you know what, this is stupid. Why am I putting my head in the clouds over something that I don't know and that I can't explain? I should appreciate what is in front of me and take that and, you know, roll with it, because she's really nice and she's very appreciative, and, you know, just because somebody saves my life doesn't mean that I have to be with them for eternity. It was brilliantly done. It was a brilliantly done scene in Disney, because he didn't even use words. You could just tell, because he likes to play this flute in the Disney version, and you could just tell, you know, he just looks at the flute, you know, and he just throws the flute, you know, and he looks back, and he's gonna walk up to that tower, and then he hears a voice, and he's like, what's going on? And then this is when we get Ursula being disguised up on the beach, and basically for some reason, I guess she has it in a shell, and for some reason the shell makes it so that he becomes hypnotized. Again, it's Disney logic, it's magic, woo, just roll with it. And basically he's just totally hypnotized by her, and so he's not in love with her, okay? That's one thing I think we need to make perfectly clear. Eric is not in love with Ursula's pretty self. No, he's not in love with her, he's just hypnotized. And this is what results in the marriage between Ursula and Prince Eric, is because she hypnotizes him and convinces him to marry her. And basically, in the Disney work, this is where we get, you know, the point where Ariel is depressed and sad that her dreams are not going to happen, and it kind of takes a toll on her, especially when she realizes it, especially when she realizes that he's going to marry somebody else. And in the original work, it's sort of played out in that same way, where ultimately the prince does end up marrying the girl he thinks that saved her, that he thinks saved him. But there's something that needs to be noted as to sort of how they sort of have how both characters, Ariel on one end being in the Disney version and the Little Mermaid being in the original work on the other version, sort of get this kind of redemption. And this redemption is very different. In the Disney work, it's discovered that by, I believe it is Scuttle, yes, Scuttle, one of the side characters, discovers that this whole marriage that's set up is a total sham, and that it's Ursula. And then he tells Ariel about it, and then Ariel tries to stop it, tries to stop the wedding. In the original work, there's no attempt for her to stop the wedding, because she's so succumbed by him, and to the point where she'll do anything for him, that she feels that she's powerless to stop him and convince him, and sort of be a strong female initiator. She just doesn't have the heart to do that. So you clearly see the difference in character here, and how Ariel is sort of this more independent style character who goes and tries to change things, instead of the Little Mermaid, who kind of goes, oh, well, he's marrying this other person, I love him, so I can't, you know, I must sacrifice, you know, it's all about sacrifice. It's like, I'll sacrifice my happiness for his. But basically, there is an attempt, actually, in the Disney version for her to stand up and convince Eric that she's the one. Still, there's this kind of persistence in her character that's not really seen in the original work. But it is mentioned in the original work that there is a catch. The sisters meet up with Ariel and they realize, oh no, well, yeah, since he's gonna marry somebody else, you got a chance, you got a shot, you know, you can live, you can still be with us, you know, and you can still have your old life back, and be a mermaid, and then die within 300 years. All you have to do is kill him. That's basically how they break it down for her. Look, we gave her, or I guess what they had to do is they had to give some of their hair to the sea witch. They're like, look, we all gave our hair, you know, all you gotta do is stab the guy. That's all you gotta do. Just kill him, and then you'll live for 300 years, and then you'll die and not exist anymore. That's how it should. That's how you're gonna get your sort of redemption here. This is how you're going to rise as a character. And the Little Mermaid in the original work does not go through with it because she just can't, because she loves him, and she just does not want to ruin his life for hers. So it's sort of that idea of sacrifice. Like, I'll sacrifice myself, I'll become sea foam, and basically that's what she does. She sacrifices herself, and yeah, basically she just dies and becomes sea foam, like they say what happens to mermaids. Or she'll just die, yeah. But I guess she'll die in the form of how mermaids die, even though she's human. And basically, once she dies in the original work, she sort of comes back as sort of like a, it's hard to explain. It's almost like she doesn't come back with like an immortal soul, but she still has this, I guess, semi-soul or something like that, because basically she sort of wakes up and then she realizes there's these other other, I want to say they're like angels, I believe, and basically they say that you, poor little mermaid, have tried with your whole heart to do as we are doing. You have suffered and endured and raised yourself to the spirit world by your good deeds, and now by striving for 300 years in the same way, you may obtain a mortal soul. So basically, it's openly sort of admitting that, yeah, you did a good job. Within 300 years, you know, maybe you could get an immortal soul. That's basically all it says. But I guess now she's kind of in a semi-soul state. This part just kind of does not make sense to me. I just don't see the logic in this. But basically, I guess it's just a ghost, you could say. She just comes back as like a ghost, so it doesn't mean that she's dead and there's nothing, but it doesn't mean that her soul is somehow immortal. It's almost like she's in between, I would say. And basically, she comes towards the ship where they were getting married, and she kind of kisses both the prince and the and his wife, even though they can't see it and see her because she's kind of dead. Again, she's like a ghost. Just think of her as like a ghost at this point. She's dead, nobody knows that she's around, and she basically sort of gives them her love, and then basically it just ends with it sort of stating, and this is literally the last paragraph of the entire story, after 300 years, thus shall we float into the kingdom of heaven, she said, and we may even get there sooner, whispered one of her companions, and these are like soul slash angel people, ghost people, in-betweener people. I think they're, yeah, because they're all in between in the same way. They're trying to gain that immortal soul like the Little Mermaid it was. Unseen, we can enter the houses of men, where there are children, and for every day on which we find a good child, who is the joy of his parents and deserves their love, our time of probation is shortened. The child does not know, when we fly through the room, that we smile with joy at his conduct, for we can count 1 year less of our 300 years. But when we see a naughty or a wicked child, we shed tears of sorrow, and for every tear a day is added to our time of trial. So yeah, it's not the most uplifting ending. It's like, yeah, you know, you suffered so much, but you're not gonna get that immortal soul yet. No, you still gotta work some more. Well, you're not working. It's technically the work of others that's really going to make yourself redeemable and gain that immortal soul. But basically it's that idea of, oh, we got this 300-year span, in order to gain an immortal soul, there's gonna be an added day if there's a good kid, there's gonna be a day taken away when there's a bad kid. And that's really basically how the original work ends. That's how the original work ends, in a nutshell. In the Disney work, as I was leaving off from that, basically Ariel goes up on the ship. All of these other companions, which basically the sidekicks, I think in particular Scuttle, call all of the sea creatures, they all come on the ship. Ariel crashes the wedding. Ariel gets her voice back. Eric breaks from the spell. Eric figures out that it was really Ariel all along. They're about to kiss before the sunset, but fail. Too late. And Ursula takes Ariel her prize for being the one who kind of wins the deal and says, yep, I got you now, ha ha ha, what you gonna do, what you gonna do? And then Triton shows up, and yeah, he shows up, and then there's some feuding going on, and then Ursula says, you know, this is a contract, you know, she signed a contract, and she puts up the contract, and then Triton's like, I'll be the one to, you know, sacrifice myself for this. I'm going to pay for Ariel's mistake. And I think it is emphasized that Ariel does try to explain, even though what she did was fairly dumb. I think in both cases what they did was rather dumb, especially when they didn't really get much out of the whole deal at the end. But basically, in the Disney work, Triton sacrifices himself partly, and him sacrificing himself means he becomes this, I don't know what they are. I still do not know what these things are, but basically they're just like little, they almost look like worms that grow out of the ground, and that's basically what he becomes. That's what Ursula transforms him into, as a form of breaching the deal, so that he'll take Ariel's place. So basically that Ariel will be free from Ursula, and Triton will be a prisoner. And the whole idea and the whole thing that Ursula is basically going for is the power of the ocean. She wants to be the ruler of the ocean. That's why this whole deal was set up. That's why Ursula wants to have this deal go through her way, so that she can gain the power of the ocean. That's really what was her entire plan. And it worked. Because basically she gets the power of the ocean, and she transforms into this gigantic, powerful sea creature, being half human, half octopus, except she's more gigantic. And basically Eric kind of comes in and sort of has a climax, and there's some fighting and some cool big Disney climax, woo! And he basically just up and stabs Ursula with part of the ship, and you kind of get this really cool good versus evil climax. And yeah, he basically kills her off. She dies, and she almost turns into sea foam too. I almost wondered, is that a reference to the original work? But basically she becomes nothing and dies. Eric becomes exhausted on the beach. Ariel still, in the end, is sulky and is like, oh, I caused so much problems, but I still want to be human. her character is so, love her or hate her, she's just like, whoa, what a character. But basically, yep, she kind of sits and pouts and mopes that she's not human by looking at, Eric longingly. And once Ursula is defeated, the spell basically breaks, and then you realize actually what happened to the worms, or like the worms from the ground, because the worms on the ground, like basically what Triton turns into, that's basically what was surrounding her entire fortress or her entire home. And basically they all turn back into mermaids, and so basically what you kind of get is if you watch how the Poor Unfortunate Souls bit, you'll see how there's like these two people, or these two mermaids. One guy is kind of they're both unhappy with the way they are, and so they change themselves, and then that's sort of how she makes her deals, is basically, she ends up winning the deal somehow and changing them to these like worms. And so that's how that whole worm, how did they get here thing is explained pretty much, for the most part. And so that's really how the Disney work plays out. And Triton kind of has a change of heart and is like, yeah, I'll just let Ariel be human. And so he lets her be human. He could have this whole time just been like, yep, be human, go and be human now. And she becomes human, and she and Eric basically marry, and that's really the end of the Disney version. So yes, these are fairly different, and I apologize that this video went on for so long, but there was just way too much to explain. But I think really the gist of what you just have to understand between the original and the Disney version is that they're both unique in their own special ways, and they all have something, I think, both to offer. But the original work is a lot more darker, and it's dealing with a lot more different themes, I think, than the Disney work, whereas the Disney work is trying to be all uplifting and be like, be determined, and in the original work it's kind of like, you must suffer and sacrifice and give everything for those you love, and all that jazz. It almost seems like these two works play out on a different extreme. There's the extreme of being selfish and getting whatever you want and being determined that the Disney work really emphasizes, and while at the same time not really sacrificing much in the end. And then there's the original work where you sacrifice so much, and even then you don't even get ultimately what you want. Yeah, it really sort of plays into that both extreme, on those extremes, for the most part, and it doesn't seem like there's like a middle ground. I think often people complain about the Disney work, and sort of praise the original work because, she's so nice and she sacrificed so much, and she didn't even get what she wanted at the end, there's so much to admire in that. I go, yeah, there's a lot to admire in that, but at the same time it's like, it's almost to the point where it seems so cruel, and it doesn't really offer anything encouraging to children, really. I mean, I don't even understand why this was intended to be a children's novel, but I guess Hans Christian Andersen really likes to push the envelope of saying, yep, you're never gonna get what you want, but you gotta sacrifice either way, and which kind of doesn't really make any sense either. But really, these works, I just think, revolve around this other kind of extreme. It just kind of depends on what more extreme you're on. Are you on the extreme more of sacrificing ultimately, even if you don't get what you want or what you need, you know, just for other people, and then maybe even suffer some more even after the whole ordeal? Or are you more on the side of, I'd rather have less risks, less consequences, and still get what I want, even though I didn't do much to get it, or maybe more or less than maybe somebody else did. I think that's really what these two works really entail. I'm not saying that Ariel didn't sacrifice anything on her part in the Disney work, but at the same time it seems like the original work played out that these risks as well as these consequences were a lot more profound and gruesome, unlike the Disney work where it's kind of played more for kids, and then they have to make it seem less on the extreme. But I think at the same time they kind of created this other kind of extreme with Ariel personally as a character. But for the most part, I think that's really all I can explain about both these works. I have the original copy right here. I'll be sure to put link below to the original work. I'll try to see if I can find the Disney work, but I doubt it's probably going to be up on YouTube because it is rather one of the more popular Disney movies, so might not be on there, but I'll see if I can find something. But I think that's really all I can say. But any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them, and until next time, everybody. Bye-bye. The crowd just likes to tilt. I don't understand this, why? But who knows? It just has a mind of its own. Does not want to obey the princess. But again, maybe life sometimes doesn't offer you everything that you heart's desire without trying to do something about it. But either way, until next time, everybody.